Hi, and a good day to everybody. My name is Lam Chiu Ming, or just Lam. Well, first of all, I would like to thank you for taking time to view this video which I made, which basically is to share about the automation framework that I had developed in my current employment. So let's move on to the framework itself, and I suppose a brief introduction is warranted. Now, the language used in developing the test cases and the processes at the back is Java, and the test functionalities are based on the Selenium Webdriver tool. Now, on the left side of the screen here, this is basically showing the block diagram and the test flow of the framework. Now, let me just scroll up and down, and yep, as you can see, it's pretty simple, straightforward, and not so fancy framework. Okay. Now, on the right side of the screen, this is the foldering system that forms the structure of the framework. Now, if you notice that this little file here, the run.bat file, this is a batch file that actually kickstarts the whole test automation process. And this file here, the test config file here, actually stores the parameters that is required for setting up the environment in which a particular test case need. But we'll look into the content of the file a little later on. Now, the jar folder here, let me just click it in. Now, it contains all the executable Java files. These are actually the test cases written, of course, in Java. Let's go back out. Okay, and the next folder here is the TD folder, or as its name implies, the test data folder. Now this folder stores the test data sheet, which contains the data as required by a particular test case. And let me just click inside, and there you have it, the file, the sheet that contains the test data. This is the sheet here. Right, let's move on. We'll look into the content of the test data a little later on as well. Now the folder here, the third folder here is the TR. Okay, it's abbreviated TR. Of course, it represents the test result folder. Now this is a folder where the generated test result will be stored. Okay, right, that's basically about the foldering system of the framework. Okay, now coming back to the block diagram here, let me just scroll back up here. All right. Now we can see that in order to kickstart the test execution, the user will click on this little file here called the run.bat file here. And let's take a look now. Being a BAT file, we can actually view the content of this file, and it looks something like this. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward and simple. Now, the third line here is basically the line of interest where it will execute the file called start.jar file, the jar file. Okay, so now what is this start.jar file? Let's just close it down again, and right, it's basically a file and it's located here. Okay, yeah. So it's basically a file, and this file will actually read the test config file here. It will read this file here, running the required test cases and setting up the environment required by the particular test case. Right. Now, let's open up the test config file and see what is it inside the file. And there you have it. This is the content of the test config file. Now, each row represents a test case together with its predefined parameters. Here's the one row, and the parameters are all here. Now, on the first column here, the user can select which test cases to run simply by indicating a letter Y or N. If a particular row has an N, therefore the row of test case will not be executed, as indicated here. This row will not be executed. Now, if it is a Y that's being defined here, then this row will be executed. Now, in this way, the user is able to pre-select which test cases to be run from a so-called library or collection of test cases. Right. Now, once a row has its first column being defined with a Y, then the particular row of test case will be executed as stated here. This row will be executed. Now, moving along this row here, the next column, which is a test case column, whatever that is keyed in here will be used as the name of a particular test case. All right. For example, in this case, it will the test case name will be demo_ff. Now notice that the letter FF is appended to the test case name. This is imperative as it is used by the framework to determine which browser to run on. So in this case, FF denotes the Firefox browser. Let's move on to the third column, which defines the location of the jar file to be executed. Now recall that the files in the jar folder earlier on, which are simply the test case to be executed, written in Java. Moving along to the fourth row, or the fourth column, where the test URLs are defined. Now the reason for this column is that in my current employment, we need to test our apps on different servers which bears different URLs. Like for example, a test servers having URL 1 and a production server having URL 2 and so on. Right, let's move on to the fifth column here. Now, the fifth column will define the location of test data, which of course indicates the path where the test case should go to in order to look for the required data. Okay, to the sixth column here, this is the sixth column. And this is where the location of the test result is being defined to store in. And on to the last column here, the seventh column, is where the number of cycles that the corresponding test case is to be executed. As in this case, as you can see on this row number 5 here, it's been defined, it has been set to run twice, which means that the test execution will be reiterated twice. So now, with the reference to the current setup of the test config displayed here, let's go back to the block diagram and continue with the flow. So now, after the environment has been set up, the start.jar or the start.jar file will extract the parameters from test config file and call upon the test case to be executed. Of course, based of course on the Y and N selection in the first column of test config. If you recall in this file here, test config file here. So start.jar will read from this particular Excel sheet and start to execute whichever test cases which has this first column stated as Y. Okay, you can put this down. Now, upon running the test case, a call will be made to test data file, denoted here in this diagram, to extract the required data. Now, let's open up the test data file and see its content, which is around here. This is the test data. And if you look and if you see, you can see these are all the data required by that particular test case. Right. Now, this is a test data file, and this particular file is common to all test cases. In other words, all test case that has been developed will actually call to this one single common test data file for required data. So now the question here is, how will the test case know which set of data it needs? Now, in this test data sheet, at the bottom of the sheet right here, there are tabs which has been labeled with the names that are related to a particular test case. In other words, the test case actually knew which tab to refer to in this common test data sheet. This functionality is hard-coded into the test case jar file. Right, now moving back to the block diagram here. Now, besides calling the test datasheet, the test case coding includes a function which calls to a common web page here, which is simply a Java class that contains the calls to interact with the elements on a web page via Selenium Webdriver tools. One could actually think of this common web page as similar to the page object model concept, which is basically the framework is based upon. Now, after the test case has been executed, with all the validation and verifications, a test result sheet with this format here, no, not this format, the format will have a test case name followed by a date and time, will be generated and is stored in the predefined location as per the test config sheet. For example, if you pull up test config sheet again, it says that to store it in the path, in this path, and that's where the test result will go to. This is the test result file here, and the format is the test case name as being defined here, the test case name, followed by the date and the time of execution. And that's basically how the framework works. And of course, what's a demonstration without a proper demonstration? Sure, I'm going to go ahead and run a sample, and see how all fall into this one single framework. So, I shall be using the existing configuration, this configuration here, okay, and let's go. So the test basically is to check whether each of the buttons here are returning the correct corresponding values here. For example, if I click on MYR30, it should display the correct values here. So that's what basically this test is all about. Right, and we've just done with the first cycle. Remember that we have defined to run the test on 2 cycles, so this is the second cycle. Right, so the test is done for 2 cycles, and let's get to the TR folder right here, and this is where the test results are stored, and there you have it. Okay, so previously it was empty, and after the test execution, there's one file being stored here, and this is the file that follows the format that we defined earlier on: the test name, the date of testing, and the time of testing. And let's just open up the test result file, and there you have it. The test results of our test case with the testing being executed twice. How do we determine that? Okay, if you look at this carefully, these are there are some repeated values. For example, demo ff cellcom, expected result, in the actual result that we need. If it's when the comparison is be done, if it fits well, it's a pass. As you can see, all the results are pass, and the 2 times execution is you can see it here: cellcom, 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 digi, 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 and next one here, the second iteration is here: cellcom, 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 digi, and u mobile. So there you have it, the test results with the test cycle being run twice. Okay, so that's basically wraps up the whole test automation framework that I developed. Admittedly, it is crude, but the point is it does what it intends to do. And of course, improvement to the system is ongoing as we speak. Now, I hope that I'm able to share comprehensively my work with you all. And if you have any questions regarding about my framework or basically about myself, feel free to drop me a line via the contact info found on this website. And with this, thank you again for your time and attention, and have a nice day. Thank you.